to do. I like that thing that we did, and you seem to like it too.
I did.
Where we just start rambling like this, and then
Yes,
we say,
yes,
"Oh,
yes.
yeah, we're recording. We should start now."
Well, give me some sense, I think, and our audience maybe some sense of how long we're going to talk today.
Let's hear about Oktoberfest. Uh, we heard me rambling on about back pain, uh, and I saw in the expression that now is it okay that I just refer to the Boyertown area expression as the expression for short in conversation, or do you and because I caught myself. Remember when you corrected that email? You said
Yes,
it's the
Boyer
Boyertown area
area
expression because,
expression.
and I thought about that a couple different times, and was more in anything like on the radio or anything. I'm more uh, strict about using the full name. But if I refer to the expression here,
The
is that
expression is perfect. That's
okay?
what
All
we
right,
do.
that's
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I learned in college that there's no such thing as a frat. That is in the Greek society.
Hmm.
Frat is a four-letter F word.
Yeah,
It's insulting. You say fraternity,
I see.
and, and so I didn't want to do that same thing here.
No,
But
it's the expression. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
cool,
yeah,
good,
yeah.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So Oktoberfest. That's where I saw it
okay. Yeah.
in the
So,
expression.
yeah, the expression covered Oktoberfest a little bit with a bunch of photos just to give folks an idea of what was going on in town. It's the 16th year of Oktoberfest. And shout
Wow.
out to Cindy and Jeff Carver, who 16 years ago started the first one and ran it for 5 or so years, I think. And then it was taken over by a variety of other people. But it's really grown and it's become the place to be um, in September for Oktoberfest.
Where is the play? Where do they have that?
Well, you're familiar with Boyertown, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
in Boyertown, it is in what is called the town parking lot. It used to be called the inner core parking lot behind Bouse's drugstore. There's a huge
Oh
parking
yeah.
lot now.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
So they close off the parking lot for the weekend and set up all sorts of tents, and people come and bring their tables and their booths and so forth. So that's
Okay.
where it's set up. Yep. It's a really
So
cool
I
thing.
had actually envisioned that happening down at, was it where Elixon's used to be? Is
Okay,
now
sure.
the brewery, uh,
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 well, the
or a
brewery's
cider
across the
place?
street from well, it's Dealme on the street on East
Yeah,
Philadelphia Avenue
yeah,
on
yeah, right at
the
the
north
tracks or close
side,
to the tracks.
right at the railroad tracks on the north side is Dealme Games. And then on the other side of East Philadelphia Avenue, the south side, is the Other Farm Brewing Company. But behind Dealme Games is Elixon's.
Okay. Well, Elixon's used to be right on the street
It is not
originally,
right. Yeah, it is not right
years
on the
ago.
street. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, it's
Okay.
behind. Yep,
Okay.
yep, yep, yep. But he's got a
Okay.
nice thing going on there. He's got the gardens of Boyertown, and now the Before I Die wall, the mural wall that we had up during Studio B's
Yeah.
legacy
What
exhibit.
is that about? I
Oh
saw
my
that in
gosh!
the expression too.
Yeah, it is a mural wall that was constructed by John Martinetti and painted by Andrew Garcia. Got to get my plugs out there.
Yeah.
And stenciled by my friend Amy Musapapa. Anyway, it's an international project that's in, I think, over 70 countries and in over 35 languages. People construct something. They paint it on the side of the building, or they construct something like we did, a freestanding thing, and it's stenciled with "Before I die, I want to blank." It's a sentence starter and invites people to record or to write on the wall with chalk the ending of that particular sentence. So we invited people during the legacy art exhibit that was in at Studio B over the summer, we invited people to participate in the Before I Die wall. And Amy Muzapapa, who, like I say, ended up doing the stenciling, she was on vacation in Alaska with her friend Judy Wetzel. And they were having coffee at some little coffee shop. And in front of them, they saw this group of people kind of crowded around something. And when they went to look what the something was, it was a wall that they were writing on that, again, began with Before I Die, I Want to. So
Okay.
Amy, knowing that I tend to do things in town, um, texted me and said, "We have to do this in Boyertown." And as it happened, I had already received grant funding from Berks County Community Foundation for my Legacy Remembrance Matters art exhibit and anthology of poetry and prose and art. And it fit in perfectly with the Legacy project. And so we just made it happen at the same time. Anyway, it was really, that's what the Before I Die wall is. But it's moved now. We used to have it between what is the Peppermint Stick now and Bridget's Place, the walkway from East Philadelphia Avenue into the parking lot. That's where it had been for the summer as part of Studio B's exhibit. And now it moved down the street to occupy almost at the pavement on the street level. Level's not the right word, but it's right there at Deal Me In Games by the railroad tracks, inviting all sorts of people who walk
Okay.
or ride by there to add their thoughts. So it still exists. I thought it would be over at the end of our Legacy exhibit, but Amy wanted it to live on. So it is now part of Ellicton's deal. So
So
it's good.
Studio B is on Philadelphia Avenue too.
That's correct. It's beside the grill shop, the infamous grill
Okay.
shop. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's still operating?
Yes. Oh, wow. Yes. Yes.
Is it
Yes. Burgers and hot
who
dogs.
bought that not long ago? Yeah, actually now a while ago.
Now, a
Um
while ago, Mike
Mike.
Moyer, Mike
Yeah.
Moyer,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
coaches assorted things, baseball in particular, I think. Yeah. But
Baseball and I
anyway,
think basketball.
pardon me.
I think he was an assistant somewhere for basketball,
I think he's
but
involved in
then
a lot of things. Yeah.
I think he was for a while, like when I was there, the JV coach for baseball at the
Could
high
be.
school.
Could be. Could be. I don't know his entire history, and I should sit him down for a Be Inspired podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know,
Todd.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh,
And Todd.
Todd.
Yeah.
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 Yep. Yep. Well, I saw Todd recently. He was. He was. I'll get it. My brain stops every now and then. Maybe you understand.
Uh,
Anyway, he was part of the dedication of a brand new bear fever bear about a month ago.
okay.
A young fellow um, died in a motorcycle accident, and the family and the Boyertown Midget League Baseball group sponsored a bear feeder bear that was painted and installed finally about a month ago. But the young man died 2 years ago, and it took a little while to get bear in Boyertown because COVID happened and all sorts of supply chain issues happened. And, anyway, I saw
Was
Todd
this the one
there
on
for
422?
the bear.
No, the motorcycle accident.
I don't, I don't remember. I'm sorry. There
No,
have
it's
been a
okay.
number of them.
Yeah. Oh man. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway,
That's a
I saw
topic.
Todd there, and he had words about the young man. Anthony Rhoda was his name, and
Okay.
so I saw Todd there. But Todd also, good to know, snow plows my parking lot when it snows a
Oh,
lot.
nice.
So he comes in his Jeep and plows my parking lot, so I don't have to shovel it. Or my husband doesn't have to shovel it, I should say.
That's key.
So we're all over the place here in Boyertown, doing
Yeah.
all kinds of different things. But
Well,
anyway,
somebody I once met said it takes a village.
it's exactly right. So it's a pretty cool village here. We do a lot of
Yeah.
different things. So yeah, I guess that was mostly my weekend, you know, not a whole lot of stuff. We had friends visit yesterday, and my daughter came yesterday, and so we hung out for a little while. It was good. It was good.
Nice.
It was good. It was good. But I'm always glad to get back to work, and I look forward
Yeah.
to chatting with you today and
Yes.
figuring out what problem of the world we were going to solve today. But I have to say, just because we are just starting this project. One thing I learned after our initial episode was that I have some things to learn. And one of them is that I can be something besides a teacher.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah. So, like, I was sharing with my friends after our last episode that I felt like I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how to feel about our first episode, because I'm accustomed to having a beginning, a middle, and an end, right?
Yeah.
And a point. And my friend said, "Oh no, Jane, this has to be a conversation," because I really liked the first part of our first episode where we just kind of rambled on a little bit and just kind of talked to each other. So I have to learn to do that. That's a new thing for me. That's a new
And
thing
then
for
we
me.
remembered that we had an audience and a show to get to, and we welcomed them all of a sudden.
Yes, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, we should be a little what more formal now, or not. Anyway,
Or not. Yeah.
or not. But
It is time.
I pardon me.
It is time
It
to
is
welcome that audience.
it is time. Welcome to both sides now. So I
I'm
promise.
Yergz.
Oh, and I promised to talk about where both the suggestion for the title of this show came from.
I had that as a
Oh,
note on the
do
calendar.
you really?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yep. Well, it has really kind of. Uh, my husband always says that he has lived both sides. And so he believes that he has a better understanding of life because he's lived both sides. He lived in a dysfunctional family that came from nothing, both parents being alcoholics, and the assorted, issues that arise from that in his life. And yet, for the past 50 some years, he's led a little bit different life. Went into the service after high school, and then we met and connected and have been married a little bit. And so he figures he has a better understanding of life than someone like I do, someone like me, because I've only lived a middle class kind of life. So,
Yeah.
and up the middle, you endeavor to give both sides. So I thought it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I figured that you and I had differences, came from different sides. I mean, age alone, not to
Right.
mention gender and, you know, careers and whatnot.
Right.
And that you might be able to counter my idealism and positivity and with some real life sort of stuff.
Maybe, but but uh,
How does it strike
sure.
you? What does both sides now mean to you?
Well, I can't seem to get away from politics as much as I would love to. But of course, my both sides, having been in the Secret Service for 21 years, 11 and a half of those years in Washington, D.C., three of those 11 with Hillary Clinton. I see Republican, I see Democrat, I see the successful ones reaching across the aisle,
Mm-hmm.
and negotiating and compromising and leaving a little pissed off, but a little gratified that we still got this, that, or the other thing. I think I said last week that a judge once told me that, in fact, some people in the area might know it was Jamie D'Angelo down in Chester County. That if both sides leave my courtroom pissed off, I made the right decision. And
I made that same comment during teacher contract negotiations years ago,
yeah, yeah,
when there was a bit of a stalemate. And I remember calling one of the board members and saying, look, you are not happy with what's being proposed, and I'm not happy. And that's the example of a successful negotiation. Yep.
Right. Right. Were you an officer in the association?
Not at all. No, I was just 1 year. The president of the Teachers Association invited like 20 some people to be part of the contract negotiation team. And
Mm-hmm.
so he knew, because I was involved with the media and wrote, that maybe I could be helpful in forwarding the ideas that they were trying to get across in negotiations. So he invited me to be part of the negotiations team. And that was the first and only time I did that. So
Okay. Because I remember
it was
Lou
scary.
Brooks was
It is
was
Lou Brooks. Yep. They were
yeah,
talking about
yeah,
the same guy. Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
Wow. Oh.
that was an interesting experience. That was an interesting experience. And some of the things, it's funny because one of my memories of that whole thing was, we were doing all that in the summertime in August during peach season, and I would make peach upside down cakes for Paul. And Lou would come over to use my landline phone, because back in the day, he had a landline phone, but it wasn't Boyertown, and so his calls were all often toll calls. So he'd
Uh,
come and use our phone and eat peach upside down cake with us.
where did he live?
He oh he lived oh he lived I don't remember. I mean,
No, it's
I
okay.
probably went to his place now and again, but I forget where he lived. And then he moved, and then he moved again, and then he moved again. So, but he
Okay.
lived outside of town, and his phone calls were, like I say, they were toll calls in the day, and that was before cell phones and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I have a landline telephone here at
Hmm.
the house, but it's not. It's a telephone. It sits on a desk, and in
Hmm.
fact, it rang this morning. Which reminds me, I had forgotten my internet bill, and that's who was calling. So I'm even surprised that we're able to do this right now. Uh, that's on the to-do list for later today.
Yeah, I
Uh,
have those too. Yep.
but the phone comes over the internet. It's not the traditional landline phone number
Wow.
that you plug into an outlet in the wall and you pay a phone company for.
Hmm.
My phone company is Frontier Internet.
Hmm.
It's what's called voice over Internet Protocol, or voice over IP, um, and it's internet phone, which brought me to my next question: are there even long distance phone calls anymore?
I don't even know. I mean, we are, like you said, I think we're connected through our internet service.
Yeah,
Although, like you, we have a phone on the desk that's connected to the wall, but it's part of the internet package.
yeah,
And we pay for it through our internet server.
right.
I'm not sure that's the right word. I'm
Yep.
so technology
Yeah, your internet service
compromised.
provider.
Yeah,
Yeah, your internet service provider.
yeah.
And
Anyway,
I'm
like
guessing your
you,
phone sits somewhere near your actual modem, the actual internet device thing.
yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah,
It confuses me, and if when it doesn't work, I'm panicked
yeah,
because
yeah,
it has
yeah,
to work.
exactly. Yep.
Yep, yep, yep. But
Yeah,
like you, I'm afraid to say, or I'm afraid to admit, that politics consumes my time.
yeah,
Listening to the news consumes my time, and possibly because my favorite TV shows, of course, are on hiatus, given the strike and so forth.
right,
But
right.
I've been, I said to my husband earlier this week, I can barely watch the news these days. It's so freaking depressing to me. And I think, and before we enter this area, I need to say a couple of things. One, this particular program is not connected to Studio B. Studio B is a
Mhm.
nonprofit, and I can't afford to risk any. any issues relative to that. So let me make that really clear. This is not connected to Studio B at all. The other thing I wanted to say is that I was a lifelong Republican until I wanted to vote
You
for
said that in your
Obama,
email.
until I wanted to vote for Obama in the primaries. And then I changed my party so I could vote for him in the primaries, and I haven't changed back, nor, sorry to say, would I want to at this particular point, because I
Yeah.
find Republicans to be absolutely unacceptable. And I think
Yeah.
the thing that, maybe you can help me understand. Help me understand this. I think the thing that most upset me this past week, and there are half a dozen things that I can talk about, but the thing that most upset me this week, and this probably comes from my being a mom, was the indictment of Hunter Biden. And help me understand. I mean, the people that wanted to make sure that he was indicted and gets to prison for a long time, they have no heart. I mean, think about what the president has gone through
Yeah.
his entire life, losing his wife and his daughter, and then Beau Biden from brain cancer, I guess.
Right.
And that's the point, to want to hurt him, to want to take him to despair over the problems of his son. And and I mean, okay, so my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's what Both Sides Now is about, okay?
Go ahead.
My understanding is that because he was in active addiction and owned a gun, bought a gun, had it for 11 days, that's why they want to send him to prison for 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
my understanding is that anybody else in this kind of situation with those details that I just mentioned, unless they committed another crime somewhere, unless somebody was hurt somewhere else or whatever, unless he was brandishing the weapon, whatever, they wouldn't even do anything about it, or they wouldn't do anything besides probation about it. But they want to send this man to prison for 10 years. I mean,
Yeah.
have they no heart? And my understanding is, and from what I've heard from the television, is that the reason they're doing it is to make it tough for Joe Biden to run for president. They want
Yeah.
to hurt him. They want
That's
to hurt him.
all it is.
Where
Yep.
how can how
That's
can how can you support
this
people
is a
like that? How can
game.
you support people like that?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
a game. And there are no rules to it. Because the Republicans have done nothing but lie so frequently that I'm trying to tell neighbors and friends and anybody, Randy Slushman. Here's a shout out to a classmate of mine that you might remember. Um, he, I posted something, and he posted a Republican counterpoint, and
Okay.
I'm like, but that's wrong. You've heard this shit for so long, you think it's actually true. And I just find it fascinating. To answer your heart question, no, zero heart. Um,
And you said it last week. One of the things I wanted to say last week,
uh,
you talked about the difference between Republicans and Democrats, and
yeah,
and
yeah,
in regards to Mitch McConnell, Democrats are saying, "Gosh, I hope he feels better." But had something like that happen to Joe Biden, they would be all nasty about it.
I was just on a Twitter feed, and I still call it Twitter. I'm not calling it X. Um, I was just on a Twitter feed the other day. They're still picking on Biden about falling. He's 80 fucking years old. I get a little pissed about shit like that because I've got parents in their 70s that, that's going to happen.
Yep.
I tripped in the kitchen the other day. Imagine if I was a little bit further away from the counter and hit myself on the head,
Yep.
as people do.
Yep. Yep.
And it's sad. Back to answer, no, there's a lot of no heart. But I'm seriously to a point now where I think there's no brains either.
Really. Well, I know there's no
Um,
heart and there's very little spine.
yeah, that too. And to do the both sides thing, the Democrats need to grow one also.
Well,
Because
let me ask you.
if they were
Yeah.
to point this shit out
Yeah.
publicly
Yeah.
as a party, it wouldn't even be close.
I
But
agree.
that's part of the game. That's part you have to be. There's this gentlemanly thing. You let the other
Yeah.
side do their thing, and we do our thing. You don't. I would last 10 minutes as president. I'd be mother effing everybody.
Yeah. Yes,
And
my husband issues the same challenge to the Democrats. Get a pair
mhm, yeah,
and fight back. And
yeah,
I have always said, well, you don't want to become what you're trying to negate, what you're trying to stay away from, what you're trying to defeat. You don't want to become them because there's no turning back from that. I mean, if you bully a bully, I don't know. Fight fire with fire. I don't know. I
yeah.
don't
I
know.
was thinking of that, and I was thinking of Martin Luther King. That you can't fight darkness with darkness. Only light can do that. You can't fight hate with hate. Only love can do that. Um, so he's
Do you
proposing the
still
opposite.
believe that?
Um,
I'm
my
having trouble.
neighbors, my next door neighbors are, I presume, Republicans. They're definitely Trump and DeSantis supporters, to a point where the one lady who's not a neighbor, but she's part of the pack. I mean, seriously, I have the next room next door in my house is a small bar room, like a second living room. Theirs is the size of my bar room and the studio, and there's four TVs in there. There is a bar. There's high top tables. I mean, they have a stage set up in the corner where they can, do play their guitars, bass
Karaoke.
guitar,
Yeah.
and karaoke, and you name it. Um, I walked in yesterday evening, I think it was, and they were all in the kitchen, like two rooms away, so they didn't hear me come in through the sliding glass doors. And I'm looking around, and there's four different NFL football games on, and I just walk through their living room and then into the kitchen to say hi to everybody. I say that room in there looks like NFL headquarters, and they all start laughing because they're actually the husband and the wife are actually in a fantasy football league. So they watch every game all season because they're keeping track of their points for the players that they've got, you know, um, in on the roster for that week. Um, they love me, and faults included. I love all of them. You don't talk politics or religion, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to that, I try to just use some level of reason and then let it go. Plant the seed, let it grow in their time. Um, and I say truthful things. Donald Trump has been married 3 times, cheated on all 3 wives, impregnated the third while still married to the second, and he's your candidate for family values. Joe Biden did not want a second marriage, did so at the request of his children, has been a lifelong Catholic, that maybe he's pro choice. But as I say on my show, 38% of Republicans are pro-choice. That's not a Republican stance. We are a blend. We are a mix.
Mhm.
And DeSantis is worse. When he announced, this was funny, when he announced his candidacy for president, I went over there and they saw the look on my face, and they made the re-announcement for me, and I said, he is the one dude that could get me voting for Trump. And the whole room just burst out in laughter. I was on calls with him and then later his staff back in early 2020 for COVID. I was the COVID coordinator for the Los Angeles field office, and I took some things upon myself to learn more about it. So I found this task force that's doing it, and I signed up to be on the calls to hear what's going on. And there's Governor Ron DeSantis denying that COVID is a real thing, which at that time was the Republican line. It's a hoax.
Mhm.
And saying that he's got more important things to do. He doesn't have time for this. And for the rest of the few calls that I was able to be on, some staffer from his was on it. Meanwhile, Miami International Airport is ground zero for COVID, not New York. There was a New York attorney. One of the things we did when our agents and employees got COVID was we had to ask them every person they've been in contact with and where. That's called contact tracing. And you basically conduct an investigation to see who else could have COVID. And what was discovered was I don't remember the name, but there was an attorney who lived in Westchester County near the Clintons who flew down to Miami to meet, I think it was an Iranian client, Iranian, Iraqi, somewhere from the Middle East, who had COVID and didn't know it. Because if you've had it yet, you are contagious, highly contagious, before you have any
Before.
symptoms whatsoever.
That's true of
So
colds, too. Yep.
once you get the symptoms, it's too late.
Right.
So that person, that attorney, then took the virus back to New York, and boom. The movie, the Tom Hanks movie, I can't think of which one. Not Angels and Demons, not Da Vinci Code, but the next one, from the Dan Brown series of books,
Mhm.
is about that very thing, with a very deadly virus that is spread intentionally by terrorists through biological warfare. And this essentially bomb is set off that contaminates water and air and anything it comes in, almost kind of like the blob,
Mhm.
and has to be contaminated before it goes off. And he's in this race of clues and the signs that he's a specialist in detecting and deciphering in where this is at. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly on a much more innocent scale. That's exactly what happened. It was brought to one major U.S. city, being Miami,
Mhm.
and who knows who that guy also contaminated while at the airport and on his
Mhm.
flight and what have you. And then that attorney took it to New York and took it from there. And now we've got, I don't know what it's up to now, but X number of
I don't either.
fatalities
Yeah.
globally in the millions.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And this guy's denying it. And I'm coming here looking for hotels close to my that I wanted to buy as my next phase in life.
Shay
Chez
Yergz.
Yergz, yep. And they're walking around with no masks on,
Mhm.
and they're sitting in restaurants, and they're having a grand old time down here.
Mhm.
And because Florida is free,
Mhm.
Florida is dying.
Mhm.
Here's another thing that DeSantis did. If you were a snowbird and you came down here for the winter, while you were here, you contracted COVID. You were treated here and you died here.
Really?
Because your so called permanent address is in another state, he didn't count that as a Florida death. He counted it, in your case, say Pennsylvania or wherever, as a fatality for that state. So Florida's great.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Australia is still in a lockdown of sorts. They're happy because their fatalities number fewer than the city of Tampa. I think one of your guests said that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the band director
Okay, sure.
who
Yeah,
who followed
John
me
Higgins.
last
Yep,
month,
yep,
yeah,
yep.
and that's where I learned that stat from him. And I looked it up, and he's right.
Yep.
Hillsborough County has more fatalities than the entire continent of Australia.
So, what's happening in Florida to counter some of your governor's misinformation?
Nothing. Um, I
Do
was
you?
listening. Well, I was listening last night on Twitter Spaces, that like radio thing that they can do with Twitter now. Um, a bunch of conservatives whooping it up and hollering and saying how they own the world and whatever. And this one lady was uber pro life, that not even a 15-week ban is appropriate. Total across the board ban on abortion is the only thing that is acceptable in the Bible. And in fact, she wants all members of Congress to be Christians.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if you knew anything about the Constitution and about your own country, you would know that 34% of our founding fathers would be what we call today agnostic. George
Pantheist.
Washington was not
Pantheist.
Christian. He was what's
Yeah, yeah.
called a deist,
Yes, deist. That's what I wanted to say.
which
Yes,
they believe in a higher power,
absolutely. This is
most of
not.
which is the
Yep,
better judgment of man.
yep, yep. We
That's
are.
not
We
God.
people keep saying we are a Christian country. No, we were not. We were founded on what you said, on deism,
Yep.
that there is a supreme being. It's more like the Indians, American
Yeah,
Indians,
absolutely. Yep,
great spirit, that kind of thing, but not
absolutely.
Judeo-Christian.
And I'm
And
not saying
I
that
have
being a
issues with
Christian
that
is
too.
bad. I'm
No, no,
just
no,
saying
no, not saying
forcing
that at
your
all.
religion on somebody else is exactly what got a lot of people killed.
Exactly. I mean, Christianity is just another belief system. It's not the only one. There are many, and Christianity is one, Judaism another, Hindu, Buddhist, Islam, all those belief systems, agnostic, a belief system. So to designate this country and demand that all its leaders be of a certain faith is just not what we were founded on. If that's the argument you're using, that we were founded on this a particular religion, no, we're not. If you want the country to be all Christian, that's a completely different thing. But I want to go back to something my husband and I were talking about
Good.
this past weekend, and that is the whole abortion issue. He asked me, "So what's your position?" And then he decided to tell me what his was, which is smart. He said
Let
there's a
you dig your
medical
grave
way.
first, right?
What?
He said, "Let you dig your grave first, and then he'll tell you what his is."
Exactly. But he said you have to divide it into two different things. There's a medical decision to be made, and then there is an abortion issue to be a choice kind
Yeah,
of to be made. That there should be no one who gets between a woman and her medical team. That never mind, how many weeks it is and so forth. It's a medical decision. And to prosecute or threaten any medical people or friends of family who help a woman who is medically in danger from her conception, is just immoral. He said, now, the other decision is, should there be abortions at all? He said there's a number for that. As what's his name was saying during Kristen, whatever her name is, um, show yesterday, Meet the Press. He said there's a
Uh,
particular number that hopefully people can compromise about. But yeah, but thinking of it as a medical thing first, separating it from the other business might help. Might help.
yeah,
Might help people make
yeah,
intelligent decisions about the whole issue. You know, God loved me. You wish there were no such thing as abortion. You know, is a fetus a person? Does it have constitutional rights? That's an argument that goes nowhere. There's no answer to that, I don't think. But there is an answer to a medical situation involving a woman's pregnancy that
right.
shouldn't be
Yeah,
interfered with by anybody, by anybody.
I I agree with like one additional thing, and I know we'll never see this either. But I just don't think men should be making decisions about abortions in the first place at all, ever. Yeah,
About a woman's
if
body, you
we're
mean?
going to, yeah, and likewise, vice versa. If I have two or three kids and you propose a bill in Congress saying that, okay,
That's enough.
it's time for the man to get snipped. No, those are
Yep.
my nuts, not yours. Hands off. And
Sounds right to me. Yep.
obviously, we'll never have
I
a law
can't
like that created by only all the female members of Congress
I
versus
just
another
can't
one
believe
by
we're
all the
having
men.
I just can't believe, I cannot believe in the 21st century we are having this discussion about Congress people involved in what a woman does with her body. It it's obscene.
Yeah, I think that's the same. The answer for that is the same reason why a Republican House is going after Hunter Biden, and that is because they're bored. They forget about some of the real things they could be doing, and they create shit to make themselves look important. That's all it
Right.
is. That's why there's 900 different committees to investigate this, that, or the other thing, so they have something to do from 9 to 5.
Wow. That's a
For,
really
I mean,
sad thing.
people bitch about teachers only working nine
Oh.
months out of the year.
Mhm.
Congress isn't in session right now, and teachers are.
Mhm.
Congress will be in session later this month, beginning of next. Once they get there, they're going to take a break for Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
and then
And
another
you
one
would
for
know these
Christmas and the
things.
New Year.
Yeah.
Yeah, then another one for Christmas and the New Year.
Yeah.
Then they take a couple days off for President's Day, and then Easter and the spring break,
Uh-huh.
and they're soon back, and it's time to be off for the summer.
Mhm.
Now, the whole concept of being off for the summer is just like the Electoral College. There's no reason why we can't have the president in office a week after the election. The reason why we have these months is because of technology back then. The same reason why caucuses, as opposed to primaries, are also outdated. A caucus is where you have to physically be there to vote at a certain time in a certain room, and they say, okay, all the candidate or all the those in favor of Jane Stahl go to this corner, and all
Mhm.
those in favor of Yergz go to that corner,
Mhm.
and then they have like two or three other, however many other candidates, and then they have rounds. So if they can't get the proper majority, the bottom portion is eliminated, and those people get to vote again. Meanwhile, my people are going over to your people and say, look, Yergz is better with this, that, and the other thing. Come over to us. And there's all this wheeling and dealing going on to the next round.
Yeah.
You can do all of that right here.
But they don't trust technology. I mean, they don't trust what? Mail-in ballots. Are they
Yeah.
going to trust your vote on a telephone? I don't think so.
So that's where I'm a little bit more for the right, and I think you do need an ID to vote.
I do too.
Um, you know, I don't think it is so much Democrats trying to gain an edge so much as it is them trying to keep Republicans from creating one. Georgia,
Okay.
the Supreme Court, or no, I'm sorry, a federal court already said that the gerrymandering going on in Georgia is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And the state of Georgia just pretty much, flipped them off and said, tough shit. That's
Right.
never been done before. And so
Hmm.
now it's going way far up. And there's all kinds of, like there's the hypothesis as to, is Donald Trump capable of running given that he's violated the 14th Amendment? And I say that in the affirmative because I think anybody with half a brain thinks he has violated the 14th Amendment if they ever read the 14th Amendment. Um, and so, with, they don't, so often courts don't dictate specifics with regards to providing remedy. They let that to the lower courts so as to not dominate. Well, now, the Republican Party is like, screw you, we're not redoing the district lines to make it safe or to make it, friendlier toward the black
Right.
community. So now there's all these intellectual and political scientists and legal scholars saying, well, what's going to happen next? Is another court going to mandate here's who's going to redraw your lines, which would be very extreme because historically the winning side writes history. Well, the majority party draws the lines, and they've done it to minimize. And if you see the actual
Participation.
boundaries, it's
Yep.
crazy.
Yep. Yep.
It's
Yep. Yep. Yep.
gerrymandering, and
Yep.
it's designed to prevent the African American or what is now back to being appropriate, the black community from electing a representative of any kind that will be in their interests. Their votes are too far spread out. They can't get a candidate that has any chance of winning. And it's been proven. So now there's all this speculation as to what's going to happen next. This is unprecedented. Somebody who, and I've never called it an insurrection. January 6th has always been a coup. And I think you're going to see that. I think once the indictments and the resulting trials come out, the best thing that can happen is for all of that information to be unsealed and made public. And
But
not
Ross,
just made public.
think? Do you think people, the cult, MAGA cult people, do you think they care about the information? I really don't
No,
think they do.
no. And that's at least at some, there was this old grandmother who was at January 6th, did time, you name it.
Wow.
And now she's admitting it's a cult and she was brainwashed. And
Yeah.
she's really been forced to, however, by whatever means, whether it was the jail time, whether it was the whole process, whether it was trying to defend herself with funds she don't have, she's forced to admit on her own, been forced to consider and eventually admit that this is a cult and that this is something that really needs to be reconsidered. MAGA folks dress up in all kinds of red, white, and blue and pro-Trump stuff, and they're worried about drag queens dressing up.
Hmm.
You look just as ridiculous as some guy dressed as a woman.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's. I don't think that it's going to convince a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So what's
I think there's some that
so
are on the fence.
so is
Um,
there any hope?
I've said a couple back in season one. One of my taglines was, "You can be a Republican, you can be a conservative and not be an asshole. And I think once these people have the courage, because there's a lot of ego going on here now,
Mhm.
to admit that they've been lied to and as a result been fooled. This is a perfect time to play the victim, because in all
It is.
actuality they have been. They are.
Mhm.
They're not the brightest victims, but they're the victims. And then realize there are other options. Remember Lynn Cheney, who they also voted out of Congress for not being MAGA?
Yep.
That's a Republican I might be able to get behind.
Yes, me too.
Chris Christie was loved in New Jersey. Whether he was a little bit of a thug too or not,
Yep.
was still actually loved for actually bringing prosperity to the state of New Jersey, what I've
Right.
always called the armpit of the country. Um, but you've got, as like addiction counseling says, the first step is to admit you have a problem.
Mhm.
And right now, the problem for MAGA supporters is Democrats, not deception.
Mhm.
And until they can let that go, and that's the thing about the politics that makes me crazy. It's like it's a sport. They
Yes.
strategize how to
Yes.
beat and
Yes.
not how to work with.
Yes. 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 And
And,
I
and
guess
that's wrong.
and I guess it's about what? Maintaining position. It's about having power. It's
Yeah.
about making it's about money,
Yeah. All of that.
all of that.
Yeah, I was just thinking the other day, and I realized that if you work in the office of a member of Congress, House or Senate, that person gets voted out. What do you think happens?
They lose their job.
You lost a job.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of other changes made when a member of Congress changes, especially if it's from one party to the other.
Right.
If it's within the party, that you might decide that you're retiring, and I've been a legal aid or somebody that's also been active. You might endorse me, and the party gets behind me to take your spot. At which point, I already know your whole office. I'm probably not going to change that many people.
Mhm.
But if it goes from one party to the other, forget about it.
Right.
Or if it was a contentious primary where they don't like each other and don't trust each other, and therefore don't trust the office people, because your office people might be sending information back to you so you can win your spot back.
Right. 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 So there's
It's
a
a
lot of
game to
stuff.
these people.
Yep. 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 One team or another.
Yeah.
One team or another. So,
So we're at about 54 minutes.
and I think that maybe our audience needs a break.
Until next week.
It's sounds good. I've got a whole list of things. And I must say, I've had some feedback from our first show or our first,
Yeah,
what do you
let's
call
go
it?
through some viewer mail of sorts.
Yeah, we have. I have one gentleman who sent me a whole list of topics he wants us to talk about, which include
Was that the guy you sent me the
extraterrestrial.
email about too?
Yes, yes, yes. Yep. And I
Mm-hmm.
have other folks who have said, where can I listen to this particular
Yep.
this particular effort?
So that is on my
And
to-do list for this week. Right now, we're just on
yes,
Spotify. But as you know,
okay,
if you go
that's
through and do the different things,
okay.
I
That's
will
helpful
have
to
that
know.
by the middle of this week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful
So
to
right
know.
now
We're
it's
on
just on
Spotify.
Spotify.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I will repurpose this footage with our album cover instead of our
Okay.
faces, um,
Okay.
because we said this was going to be audio only. Um, and I'll put that on Talk TV 24 on the YouTube channel as well, and they'll be able to hear it with just seeing the album cover. And that's, plenty of musical albums are like that on YouTube. YouTube is actually the second largest database in history
Wow.
behind
Yeah.
Google.
Well, that's where my Be Inspired podcast. That's the home. Although you can hear it in a variety of
Okay.
other on a variety of other platforms. So anyway,
Yeah, so we'll do
all
the
right,
same thing
buddy.
you do with the Spotify account, and we'll put it. I'll set it up so that it's on the other directories as well.
Okay, that sounds good. And we will get to some of these other issues. I've got a list. I've got a list of things to talk about. So
I think, yeah, you had a really good follow up email last week. I think
I did.
probably I'll make a habit of reviewing that, say perhaps like Sunday night,
Okay.
so that when we come in on Monday, it's a little bit more fresh
Okay.
and give you
Well, I
some
got
time
to
for
say some
some
stuff.
say, okay, here's yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean, we'll talk during the week, of course. That's a given.
that's good.
But and if you get a thought, text it to me or something so we don't lose it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
or email, that's fine too. But yeah, we'll get
Okay.
to the whole thing and we'll solve the world's problems.
Well, that's why we're here. We're solving the
That's it.
world's problems together,
That's
right?
it.
From both
Both
sides,
sides.
hopefully.
Yep,
Take
exactly.
care, buddy.
All right, my
Take
dear.
care.
See you next week. All right. See you, everybody.